Hello, we're back. I'm Aarnimetsa from PokerArmenia.com, and with me today is Danitah, and we are going to talk about Danitah's MTTs. Say hello to our.
Hello, everyone.
Okay,
Yeah.
I hope that everyone can hear you. You had details. This is an $11 tourney, so this is a bit bigger one. I actually thought about Jones's question in what kind of hands can we limp call, and it's now out of the that the question is, and when we limp, we fold 100% of the time if there comes a normal sized raise. And this is a good question. And I think that if we are folding 100% of the time where normal sized raise comes, then we are building our range in a way that we are having like, we are building our range that we are having like min raise, then min raise, or and min raise fold. And also one point that if you are having a lot of if you are thinking that your opponents are making a lot of mistakes by folding too much and when they are unknowns, then I also think that when I saw that you are opening from small blind or you're playing only 75% of your hands on the small blind, it might be a mistake, since if your idea that people are defending way too little from the big blind, then I think that like all of the weakest hands should even be and then there would be like limp to, and I think I think that this ranking is a mistake. But I have seen that some guys are doing this, and when they limp, you can like always just raise them, and they are basically only having limps, and they might have something like sometimes they might limp trap with aces, but generally they are like limp folding 85% of the time. So I'm thinking that if we are to fix this, we are going to have here like are like hands that flop well. That's probably going to be probably going to be the idea. That we are not taking the absolute weakest hands to limp, but we are taking hands that are having good flop playability. Like, let's say something like Queen 8 suited, Queen 9 suited, Jack 9 suited, Jack 9 off, Jack 10 off. These kind of hands that when we min raise fold, we are leaving a lot of equity and a lot of floppability to the table. But if we limp, an opponent's options are constrained to not having an easy shove as an option, so there will be more small raises, and against those small raises we can play. So I think this is going to be pretty much the difference, that how you are constructing your limp range. And it's going to be hard to balance the four ranges, but just like go through what your opponents are doing and then think about what's going to be the best way to counter what the opponents are doing.
Okay.
And that's also like, if we are doing it this way, So when we are playing hands that flop well, we are not folding 100% of these against standard raise. Rather, we are calling or playing back with like 80 or 90% of the range that we are limping. Since that's the idea of having the limp range. That we can, like the idea of having a limp range is that we can realize the equity out of the flopability of certain hands. That's how I see it, and that's probably going to be a good discussion if Jones wants to carry on with it.
Yeah,
there's also a, yeah.
That's probably something I should think a bit more about on STTs as well, I think.
There has been some points in like at least at the higher stakes there has been some points in some points going towards that direction, and especially in the hypers I think that there has been a lot of like how can you get the last bits of equity.
Yeah.
And Jones said that I'm an old-fashioned player and used to just raise from SP because it's always have felt bad to play OOP without being aggressive part on raise my need to adjust my game. Actually, I've known this already a long time, but haven't done anything with it. Perhaps this gives you motivation to also try to explore some of the lines that you haven't explored lately. And also one good point in going with the paths less traveled or going off the beaten path is that when most of the guys are almost being at raise or fold mode in SP and button, then players that are regs are used to playing back against those kind of lines. But when you are limping, there's going to be a small WTF moment in their head that, like, if you are, it's also one point of where you can create more equity for yourself. Like, you can create more equity for yourself if you are taking the game towards a direction where you have calculated the game out and you know the optimal decisions, but your opponents don't. So that's going to also be one source of equity that you can, one source of extra equity that you can add when you are playing, when you are having more lines at your disposal and when you are having more ideas on how to play a certain type of situation. And I hope I tried to explain it in a quick way and trying to get some ideas on.
Yeah, I think it was good. And hi to Blank One.
Hi to Blank One as well. Nice to see you here. And yeah, so Kauris84 chat works fine, but I took the chat from the other window since Jones's question has rolled out of the chat when we went to a break. So when we needed to get there, so like these chats that are on down here, I can't do anything. I can't interact with those. Those are not like real windows. Those are something that we are projecting on the screen. And like we have gotten rid of every control out of those, so there are no lines that are going to move. So we are in this hand. Danitah has min raised with Jack 9 off. Bruno has called. Bruno is an unknown. And we talked previously that even when we have a middle pair, and middle pair is usually a hand with that we want to check call with, I think in this spot we are not having that much equity, and I think we both agreed that this probably should be a C bet, that we don't have that much equity, and if we can get our opponent to fold weak one spade hands and fold some overcards, it's going to be okay. We check. Bruno bets for half a pot. What shall we do?
Should be our call, at least.
I think that if our plan is to go for a check call, then we should go for a check call here. And check call once. If turn is a blank, then we can check call again, or check again and see if our opponent is still betting high. If he's still betting high again with a blank, then we think that it's going to be more likely that he has an ace and we can give up. But I think that we need to call at least once here. And Bruno, is he a Brazilian player? I have no idea. I don't put a lot of weight on the country reads. I know that some players are okay. He's a Brazilian, so we should do this. But okay, let's see your notes in here. Have we answered those questions? Check folding. This was probably not good. Do we see bet here, and what do we do against a raise? If we see bet here, we are basically c betting as a bluff. Like we don't have enough equity and we don't see showdowns often enough. So if we c bet here and get raised, then we c bet fold, as we do with probably all of our bluffs. I think this is most like. I think this is a question for me that how am I valuing this post-flop situation? Shall we move on to the next hand?
Yeah.
So we are having about 11 more. So if we are going through these that one hand takes 20 minutes, then we are probably not going to finish. But we'll see. We'll try to do as many hands as we can, and if necessary, we are going to improve the speed by a bit. Let's save the layout so we don't need to move it. Sonnet Bimin raises, or that's a small raise, 2.3x or something like that. And good point on Feisty is that you should not get too scared every time the flop is monotone. Yeah, it's also a good flop to bluff when the flop is monotone, since your opponent is probably quite scared of a one or two spade hands already. Also, so like scary boards run both directions. Scary boards, when you are scared, you can also make your opponent scared. So, but okay, we are having a hand that Sonnet Bivin raises, and we are having King 7 off. What shall we do?
Yeah, it should be a call at least. I think my question was maybe about 3-betting. I'm not sure.
I think that in this spot, it's like King 7 off. Is it going to be a hand that we are going to 3-bet as a bluff, or is it going to be a good hand to 3-bet as a bluff? And I think it's going to be one of the better hands to 3-bet as a bluff here. I'm still unsure. I think that we can. I would probably want to have a weaker king before. Like even with King 7, I think that we are going to get more equity if we are just playing the pot in position and just flat calling. But I think there is a point to like divert these type of hands that are, and this is also for the previous hand, that when we talked about that the Jack 9 that we can limp it and it's a hand that flops well. Well, 7 king would be pretty much the opposite, and it would be a hand that I think that we should be min raise folding in the previous hand, or raise small folding or raise to 2.2 or something if people are not folding to min raises, but I think most of the guys are. So this is going to be a hand that it doesn't flop well. We want to get our equity realized as quickly as possible. But I think that we can realize a lot of equity when we are in position with this hand, and something like King 3 would be more of those that I would like to 3-bet as a bluff.
Okay.
And then there's also the question of the buy-in. Few hand details. It's the Sunday Storm, I think, again. This raise sizing, we are raising to, this is like 2.5 XT. I think that we probably should raise a bit higher here.
Okay.
Actually, well, we are in position, so sorry, scratch that. We are in position. This is a good. This is great, good race sizing. So no worries.
Okay.
I don't know what I was thinking. So 2.5x is around what I think that would be a good race sizing here. Opponent shoves, easy fold. We 3-bet bluffed, so it's going to be an easy fold.
Yeah.
Had some bit of a sample and villain looked ready. A bit on the tight side. Is it a good 3-bet bluff here against this kind of player, and what's a good 3-bet sizing? I think your 3-bet sizing was spot on. No complaints on there. And I think like these kind of a guys, if they are reggy looking, like if they are reggy looking, you should be 3-bet bluffing a bit more of those guys, since I think that they are likely to play a high amount of hands from small blind.
Yeah.
So against a reggy looking player, but if you would have something like 15/10 guy here, then I think that that's probably not going to be as good of a spot to 3-bet, since I think that those kind of a guys are playing like 40% of their hands. Actually, I'll smallen that up, since that shows that are we winning those hands or losing those hands. And that might influence some guys.
Mm.
Ace-10, we should be opening small. That should be quite easy to see. We are getting 3-bet small. Okay. What are we doing here?
Yeah, it should be at least a call with these pot odds.
Yeah, we can't be folding here with 22% pot odds, and it's still going to also be only 1/10 of our stack size. So, and oh, another Norwegian is not getting the. Another Norwegian is not seeing the stream. Oh. If you are having problems with the stream, please comment on those, so then they can be thinking about fixing those or finding alternatives. And also, always, if we are having any problems, please comment about those, since that's the only way that we can improve. We can't fix anything that doesn't seem to be broken. And Goblin Velho is saying all in or call. I'm thinking that in this case, calling is going to be the better option. If we are going all in here, I think that our opponent can pretty much play his range perfectly. He's going to fold pretty much all of the hands that are weaker, and he might be only folding something like ace jack off that's stronger than us. But otherwise, he's going to call us with hands that are going to crush us. So I don't actually think that going for a 4-bet here is going to be the best option. Flat call, great. Wow, this is a nasty flop. Opponent bets less than half a pot. What shall we do?
Yeah, pretty hard decision here, I think.
Yeah, we are having only one pot behind.
Yeah.
So when we are having only one pot behind, that's going to be something that makes this hard.
Mm.
We are having backdoor nut flush draw. We are having straight draw and 2 overcards. I don't actually think that it's going to be that bad if we would shove it here. Like, I think that we are going to make our opponent fold some hands that will beat us, like ace jack, ace queen, ace king type of hands. And okay, we are going to be in bad against his pocket pairs, but there shouldn't be that many pocket pairs in his range. So I would actually probably like a lot, especially it's a bit nasty when it's against an unknown, but I think we have reasons to shove here. to get some fold equity.
Yeah. Do you think it's if we are not shoving, should we be just folding this? Do you think?
I think my idea is going to be that probably shoving is going to be a best, then calling is going to be close, and or calling is going. There's going to be a gap between shoving and calling, but I think that folding is going to be the worst option here.
Okay.
I think that we have too much equity to be like we are getting 23% pot odds. We are having pretty much like we are having like I don't think that our opponent has a lot of sevens in his range, so I think tens are going to be outs for us as well.
Yeah.
So this is like shove or call, and I think that with shoving we are going to realize our equity and we can make our opponent fold better hands, and the hands that he's calling with are still going to be hands that we are having outs against and we are having decent equity against. But if we are just calling, the turn is going to be harder since our hand's equity is tied in draws, and when there's just one card to come, if we are not hitting the draw on the next hand, we are then probably going to have a harder time realizing or trying to have a harder time in feeling like when there's one pot behind, actually less than one pot behind when you are calling this, like it's going to be 27k, it's like 80% of the pot behind. It's going to be that when your opponent shoves, you should still have 30% equity, and you don't get 30% even if you are having an open-ended straight draw. So there are going to be quite few cards that are actually going to give you enough equity for the river. There's a lot of discussion on chat. Thanks for that. That's always a good thing. Because discussion and thinking about poker situations is the one thing that is going to make you a better poker player.
Yeah.
But okay, we called. We are having now we are having the open ender, so we are getting like 8 outs if our ace is also not, and our ace is also out, so we are having like 11 outs. But when an opponent shoves, we are getting 30% pot odds, and if we are having, this is actually also quite nasty. That like what kind of a range our opponent is shoving here. Like our draw equity that we are getting against everyone is going to be in my mind it's going to be around 22-23% that are going to be quite solid hands. But then it's going to be a question like if our opponent is shoving, like what kind of a range would he need to have? Like if he's shoving 30% of pure bluffs, problem is that when he's 3-betting pre-flop, even his pure bluffs are having good equity against us since they might be dominating aces bluffing here with. And if he's having a 9, we are going to need to hit some of our outs. If he's having 2 pair, we are going to have only 8 outs, so that's going to be if he's having 2 pair or better, then we are going to have only 8 outs, so we are having like 16% out against those hands. If he's having something like king queen or another spade draw, the spade draws are now some of the spade draws are hitting a jack here. So against spade draws, we are going to get good equity, but I'm not sure that are we going. I think that it's going to be close. That like if our opponent is bluffing with king queen or and having some flush draws here as well. The problem with flush draws is that so many of his flush draws are either beating our kicker or then they are hitting the board. And in either way, they are going to be far ahead of us.
Yeah.
So I think that actually we are probably going to get something like 25%. And this is like if the jack would be a jack of spades, better for us. Then we could call this, or if it would be, I think actually if it would probably be any spade here, I think that we could call it, but against the non-spade, non-7, non-spade, non-7, non-ace, we can't call. So there are like 15 cards that we can carry on if 15 cards come on the turn. Probably going to be good enough to call the flop still, and we are not always getting shoved against, so I think this was a good fold, but on the flop we probably should have shoved.
Okay.
And in most cases it's overpair rather than ace high, in my opinion. And people play like this when board's starting to be draw with overpairs and TP. I think that like any value hand or any draw, any spade draw would make a lot of sense here. The pot is not that big, so I'm not sure if I could have played this differently. Maybe raising flop is good. Yep. I think you have analyzed this pretty much to perfection, but I think it was still good that we looked through it.
Yeah.
But this is like one of those ideas on when we are having a good draw that we just want to cash in on those at some points. Like in those spots, if we can cash in on the value of our draw on the flop when we are having two cards to come, then and we can make our opponent fold some better hands, it's usually going to be a good idea as a general.
Yeah, that sounds good.
But good point on blank one that there are also that in. I think that there are just going to be so many more ace highs that opponent has in his range than pocket pairs. So like there are going to be a lot of blockers here for the general pocket pairs. There are not going to be that many opportunities to have a combination of pocket pairs.
Yep.
And combination of pocket pairs that's an overpair and not a set. Okay. Queen 10 suited should be okay enough to open. This is a bit nasty. There are some good re-steal stacks, but in general people seem to be quite passive. And we are seeming to have a player that we want to play against on the big blind, so nice. Opponent checks. What shall we do?
C-bet, I would say.
What's the sizing for a c-bet?
Around could be half pot or even a bit less.
Yeah, something like, I think every pot sizing from 2k to 2.7 are going to be good. But half a pot or a little less. Seal of approval here. Okay, the board turns to be a bit more drawy, and we are having a guy that can play pretty much any hand here.
Yeah,
what shall we do?
Now it's best to check, I would say.
I think that it depends. Like if we are not, still would make some sense to, if we are not going to get raised often, then it's going to make sense to. And I think that guys that are loose passive are not going to be guys that are re-raising us a lot. So I think that this is actually probably a spot that two barrels would make sense, and we are still having this is semi-bluffing spot. Like we are still having a lot of equity here. We are having 13 straight outs, or 13 outs for flush, and actually 12 outs for flush and inside straight draw, and then there are also going to be 6 outs for a higher pair. So I just think that we are having a pretty huge draw here, and even if it would be like we are betting and our opponent is shoving, I think that we probably still would need to call. I think this is good. I don't think that we need to check this. Let's see what you have written here. Somehow managed to misread my hand as 10 of spades, 8 of spades. Turn bet is probably bad with my actual hand. I don't think so. Like I don't think that 10-8 suited is going to be that much better here. I think that turn bet is still going to be good.
Okay.
And Pikusak Miku, we can two barrel and make him fold ace-x and some pocket pairs. Yep. That's what we can do. And also, if he has a 6 or a 7 or 6 or 4 or 7, we can probably make him fold against the second barrel.
Okay.
I also like Goblin Velhos idea on like 1.8k. Then on turn we could get the smaller amount. I just like to bet a bit bigger when there is a flush draw on the board. Like I don't think that half pot is going to be too big. I think this is probably that on the turn this is probably going to be like we could have managed with only 4k as well.
Yeah.
But if we are having a loose passive guy and we completely brick the river and he has called us twice, I probably wouldn't go for a 3-barrel bluff. I think that's a way to lose quite a lot of chips for weaker players. Like, if he calls for 2 streets, we'll know that he's going to have a hand that he likes for some reason. We don't know the reason, but if it's going to be a hand that he likes, then it's like if it's a blank on the river and we don't hit our flush draw, it might be that he's with a bigger flush draw. But I think most of the time he's going to have a pair or 2-pair or straight kind of a hand here. So I don't think that we can get from loose passive guy. I don't think that we can get the pot on the river that often. But I think that probably the biggest difference is that you were thinking on turn that if he shoves or if he re-raises here, can we call? If we are having queen ten suited, and I think that we can. There is going to be just enough outs.
Okay.
That if he calls, then it's going to be like we are going to need 35% ish. We are going to have 19-ish outs against the general hand.
Yeah.
He's going to have. So I think that it's going to be a bet call on the turn. But I think well played, even if you misread your hand. Sometimes it requires it to play it well, but generally I think that you are going to. I think that what I have seen from you in your previous sit and go coachings, and I think your last session was with Kalle on that. I think that you should be crushing these games pretty quickly. Like the more quicker you can adjust your mind around ICM, that you can min raise call with a wider range. That's probably the biggest difference. And some shoves you can do that you weren't able to do. That's going to be a big difference.
Yeah. And I think my like when I look at my sessions in HRC, it has been usually my calling ranges are a bit too tight.
Yep. And also, I think that there are some spots that you can't even find on HRC that are spots that would be like are okay as a shove, but would likely be better as a min raise call. That's something you can't find with HRC, but it might have a big impact also on how much money you are making on the games.
Okay.
Mm, 1.4k against a guy that seems slightly reggy.
Seems like pretty easy shove.
Yeah, I think that if a guy also, if we are having 110 hands on him and he's raising like 5 out of 22 on EP, then it's going to be like just chip it in with pocket tens.
Yeah.
I think this was a big mistake. We also can call this. This is not going to be a standard set mining situation. But
Mm.
pocket tens is not a standard set mining hand. Pocket tens is a great set mining hand, and there is going to be extra equity that there's not only on set mining that you can have value in here.
Yep.
Like pretty much the only way that we are going to give up tens here is that if our opponent is playing only a range of like pocket eights and ace jack and higher. And I think that when opponent opens from 1.4k, I think shove is going to be the best way to play with pocket tens out of position. I don't see that there's going to be a better play with going for just a small raise. But folding is not going to be misclick. Ouch. That's also something that if it's a misclick, then it's something that we pretty much can't go through.
Yeah, I think there was like one or two hands that was misclick. So, and I think I marked it just so we didn't have to spend time on them.
Yeah. Okay. Flat calling is going to be okay. We could also 3-bet here to 240-ish. I think both are going to be close in equity. We don't hit anything. Probably going to be standard as a check and trying to see the next card, and if it's going to be a spade or a queen or an ace, then we can play more aggressively. It's not. Our hand still gets a bit better equity. Check calling makes sense here, I think. It makes perfect sense here, actually. We are having the ace here, so if opponent is not having a 6 or a jack, and there are plenty of flush draws that our opponent can have. Still checking makes sense. If we are going to realize our showdown equity, then we try to get to showdown as cheaply as possible. Opponent checks back, and I think checking the river is important in here since it gives your opponent a chance to bluff with his flush draws.
Yeah.
And we are splitting the pot. I think this is well played. In general, I don't see a... Should this be a 3-bet or a flat as default? Unknown villains. This is going to be a basic poker coach thing that it depends. It's like if we are having... Generally, we are thinking that what are going to be good things for us and what are going to be bad things for us. One good thing for us is going to be Race Queen is actually going to be a good hand. It's going to be a hand that plays well. But it's going to be a hand that is relatively losing value when it's a three-way pot. Since most of the hits that we are going to have with Ace Queen are going to be high pairs, and on high paired situations there are going to be spots that it's not going to be as nutty as it would be in a heads-up pot. Like in a heads-up pot, a pair of aces or a pair of queens is usually going to be enough. But if it's a three-way or four-way pot, then the just big pair loses a bit of its allure or its charm. So in this case, it makes sense to have a smaller sized field, 3 betting usually works quite well into lowering the field size. And when we don't have the position, this is also a spot that we don't mind if we win the pot pre-flop. So
Okay.
this is spot like, I think that ace queen is going, it can be both directions. Is this a 180 man? I don't know.
Yeah, I think it should be.
I'm just watching that. Should it be then a final table? No, not even close. Then it doesn't matter. Okay, we are having completely unknown opponent that has raised once before. Now he raises again. What shall we do?
I think I would like to just call her. But
Calling or shoving, I think both of those make sense. Calling is probably going to be a bit better. Something like ace king suited, it probably make more sense to 3-bet shove. And with ace jack suited, it makes probably more sense to just call. Oh, this is final table.
Okay.
So if this is a final table, then we probably could even argue that shove makes even more sense, even if our opponent isn't as ICM aware. But if this would be not a final table, then I think that it would be.
I think there is more on the note if you scroll down.
Oh. I think this is a good spot to ask how much we should 3-bet. Is this about what kind of a range we should 3-bet, or is it more about what's the raise sizing should be?
It's about the range, I think.
I think it's going to be like we want to flat call some of these. Like in this, if our opponent would be ICM aware, then it would probably make sense to, like, if our opponent would be really ICM aware, then shoving widely here would be a good idea. But I don't think our opponent is that ICM aware. So actually, this is probably a good hand to crunch a bit in HRC.
Yeah.
And call is why. When we are having an ace jack suited, we are going to have a spot where we are going to have a lot of options open. And it's going to be a hand that will play pretty well. I'm going to find out how much I can widen this one. Okay, let's not import, but let's start with an advanced hand. It's based from clipboard. This is an MTT 180 player game. And it's going to be min-raise open. Let's just fold the first one and let's make it count some ranges to us. Without ICM, it's going to be a spot where I think that it's going to make sense to call with some of our hands that are going to play well. and realize their equity. And on some spots, like if we are having, like trying to optimize our ranges, that the better our hands flop, even though they would be profitable as 3 bets, we are trying to build our ranges in a way that if we are having hands that are having good flop playability, then we are more apt to calling those. And if we are having cards that are having good 5 card equity, then we are going to shove more of those. Like we are pretty much shoving any pocket pair there, but something like ace jack suited, ace queen suited, ace 10 suited, there are going to be hands that are playing really well, or king queen suited, king jack suited. Those kind of hands, I think that we are playing better if we call them, and some of the weaker like suited aces I would like to shove a lot. Kanut Katton says that in this hand we shouldn't think about Villain's ICM awareness, because if he is ICM aware, he's opening tight. That's actually a question, that why is he opening tight if he's ICM aware? And if he's not, he's folding more combos because he has weaker hands in his opening range. If he's not ICM aware, I think that there are going to be spots that our opponent is not understanding how weak the hand itself is. And ace jack is a hand that's pretty much in the middle, like he's only calling with better and folding worse. I think in MTT or in 180's final table, we are going to see opponents calling with worse. And I think that the ICM awareness, it matters here. And why do I think that the ICM awareness matters here? That if there are players that are ICM aware, but are also aware that where people are making the most mistakes in the final table, I think that they are going to open more than would be like the optimal HRC range here, since I think that people are going to, in final table, people are going to have their hands are shaking a bit, and they are excited about the money, and they are probably going to fold a bit too much. Now we know that there are going to be 180 players in this MTT, and there are 6 players remaining. But if we 3-bet, I think that we are always shoving. We are maximizing our fold equity by shoving.
Yeah.
And if you are thinking about, like, I think that this is likely going to be too much, since this is going to be a lot of ICM. There's going to be a lot of ICM implications in here. Actually, with even 7.5%, ace 10 suited is the only worst hand, and ace jack off is the only worst hands. So this is 180, and we are on the final table. I think something like this is going to be what we are going to build our shoving range from.
Okay.
And there are some hands that are some of these suited hands that I think that might be better to keep the pot smaller and trying to find out equity other way around.
Yeah.
And some of these, like small pocket pairs, we don't need to even discuss something like pocket tens and below, since those are probably always going to be better as shoves. And then also something like ace jack off, king queen off. I think these hands are. And does this make sense? It probably doesn't. Let's try to shape that range a bit as well. This is what in general, I would think if I don't have a lot of ideas. So that opponent would be pretty much raising with the pretty hands and calling with the pretty hands. Oh, it turns out even more than I thought. Does this make any sense? I think this makes sense, but it's also something that I think that we can still, even against that kind of a race range, if we are keeping his whole range together, it's going to make a lot of sense to still call some part of this range. He checked me, says that I don't believe that he will call with 7s or 8s. I'd say that that's going to be something that in MTTs people are making a lot more mistakes by calling with pocket pairs. Like in a sit and go, you usually don't see players that are reggy that are calling with pocket pairs. But if you are in MTTs, I have seen it a lot more that people are, when they are calling too much, they are calling with. And shouldn't you change his calling range now? Now it's already locked to like pretty hands that I think that if opponent is going to be likely going to be an ICM non-ever guy, what would it in general look like? That he's going to probably open a bit too tightly anyways, but he's going to be calling too much of these hands still. That's going to be my idea, and I think that something like pocket eights probably makes sense to shove. And then some of these hands are going to be good enough to be called, and there are going to be some ICM that will make collision with the second largest stack here pretty bad thing. And of course, if we are looking at like what's the equity of this situation, it's like our opponent, if he chooses this kind of a strategy instead of an ass strategy, he's going to lose something like 0.1, 0.2 of equity. I think that the strategy that is chosen for him is not going to be a good one. Interesting. Taking a strategy that against one player that's not Nash would result in higher equity for him. This is something that I need to look into myself, since it was only locking his ranges. So he can switch his ranges to be that he can switch his ranges to increase his equity, and the other guy can't get ranges that would make that one unprofitable. There might be a bug somewhere. What do you think? You have been also doing a lot of stuff with HRC. Or actually, let's take a 5-minute break and let's get back in 5 minutes